So, I think I sent you on the email. We're gonna talk about the Randle Cycle to the Brazilian public.
Sure.
Like I told you, the Brazilian public does not know what the Randle Cycle is.
Nor
Does
does
not know,
anybody
and no
else.
one.
Yeah.
That's why there's no one better to talk to than you.
Mm.
So, good morning, good night, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are with Professor Bart. This guy is the guy that knows the Randle Cycle the most. Therefore, this podcast will be just about the Randle Cycle. It's very important for you that is watching to understand what the Randle Cycle is, and that's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna make you understand in an easy way. Professor K, for those who don't know, can you please introduce yourself?
Hello. Well, yes, that is my name, Bart Kay. I used to be an academic for several decades. I thought better of that in about 2018. And instead, these days, I'm a social media influencer. I'm a marketer of nutraceutical products, which you can see over my right shoulder as you look at me. Uh, you should check those out. They really are what they say they are. And I also do a bit of consultancy as well for people that want second or third opinions or even first opinions about various things. My background is in health science, variously, ranging the gambit of topics from exercise physiology through human nutrition right through to cardiovascular pathophysiology. So, what causes heart disease and what doesn't. All of that is overarched by a significant understanding of statistical inference research methodology and the ethics of research procedure. So that's me in a nutshell. Pretty busy, but luckily we can carve out time for these kind of discussions. So yeah.
Yes, sir. And
Mm,
your experience is in like 20 plus years
mm,
of academia, right?
yeah.
Okay, nice, nice. So, the first question to get this going is if you had to explain, Professor, the Randle cycle to a 12-year-old, let's start there.
Yeah.
How would you explain it?
Okay. Pretty simply, what I would say to someone at that level is that I want you to think of the way that our cells decide how to use different fuel sources as a track in a piece of wood that you're holding level. And in the middle of that track is a ball bearing, right? That ball bearing moves left or right depending on how you tilt that piece of wood in such a way that the ball bearing will move along that piece of wood. And it's that which is thought of or is analogous to the selection of fuel. There are two main fuel sources that a cell will use to oxidize for energy. It can use other things as well, but there's two main choices, hence the left or right analogy. So those two choices, of course, are fat or carbohydrates. Any given cell in the body, any one, let's say a muscle cell, can use both fat and carbohydrate at the same time, yes, to a certain degree. However, it prefers not to do that. It prefers to use much more strongly one or the other. And the thing that most determines what the mitochondria will oxidize in the next few minutes is what it has been oxidizing in the few minutes previous. In other words, what we're really talking about is a simple concept, inertia. And inertia is really a Newtonian thing. It says that any given thing that's doing something will keep doing that thing until a force powerful enough to cause it to do something else is applied. And that's really what the Randle cycle is in a nutshell. So to put it in slightly more technical terms, if a mitochondria in a given cell is oxidizing mostly fat, it will keep doing that in preference to using carbohydrate until one of two things happens. Either the amount of fat available drops, thus necessitating the carbohydrate, or the amount of carbohydrate being added in there is so much that it overpowers the fat and pushes the fat out of the way. It's a cross inhibition or a cross competitive nature. And if a mitochondria is oxidizing mostly carbohydrate, it will continue doing that until enough fat is applied to make it do the other thing, or until the carbohydrate runs out, basically. So when I say cross inhibition or cross competitiveness, why am I saying that? At the most simple level, when you break down fats or carbohydrates for entry into the Krebs cycle, which is also known as the tricarboxylic acid cycle or the TCA cycle, the first intermediary that's added into that system is acetyl coenzyme A. Irrespective of whether that acetyl coenzyme A is derived from fat or from carbohydrate, that's your bottleneck. In a nutshell, that's it. There is much more to it, and we can obviously and will go into much more depth for more advanced listeners. But if you just want the take-home message, that's it. Cells absolutely can use fat and carbohydrate at the same time. Yes, they can. They prefer not to. They prefer to use one or the other much more strongly. And the thing that determines the fuel source going forward for the next few minutes at least is what the fuel source has been for the last few minutes at least. That's it.
Got it. So it's a process that's continuously going on in the body, of course.
Yes.
And from what I understand, and of course I've studied this before, we have three different options, right? We have the option one. Let's say option one is you're eating a high fat diet with a low carb approach, so very low carb, high fat.
Yes.
Option two, we're eating a very high carb, very low fat.
Yes.
And option three, we're eating like most people are eating, which is high to moderate, high carbs, moderate fat. So those three options, option three activates the Randle cycle. Option one and two do not activate the Randle cycle.
Okay.
Is that right?
Not strictly. The Randle cycle is not a thing that's either activated or not activated. It's not a switch. It's faders.
Mm-hmm.
It's a series of faders, okay? The Randle cycle is activated more and more by either a very, very large amount of fat and a moderate amount of carbohydrate, or a very, very high amount of carbohydrate and a moderate amount of fat to some degree. But most powerfully, it is activated by the mixture of the two, where they are more even, the balanced diet, where people take in a mixture of macronutrients, fats, carbohydrates. It's that middle situation that's the worst one in terms of the level to which it causes those faders to be pulled up, causing the cross inhibition, the blockading of energy getting to where it needs to get to. The result of it is a decrease in the level of ATP within that cell. And the knock-on effect of that is inflammation, which is bad.
Got it.
Chronically.
So that's the next question. Yeah. So that's the next question I wanted to get to.
Yeah.
Why does pushing balanced diet, for example, why? So this not activates, but the Randle cycle goes on because of this more and more.
Yeah.
And why is that a problem? Like you said, we're gonna produce less ATP in the mitochondria.
Yes.
And so why is that bad for example, of course, if you do it in 5 days, it's not going to be bad. But why is this in the long term not ideal?
If you do it chronically, why is it a problem? Several reasons.
Yes.
The first and foremost reason why it's a problem chronically is if you have a bunch of carbohydrate, sugar, glucose in your bloodstream that cannot get access to your cells because it's locked out, because the Randle cycle faders are pulled up, that means that your body will produce more and more insulin. to try and push the sugar into the cells. And it doesn't matter to some degree how much insulin is being produced, it will not have the effect that it's supposed to have, because ostensibly the cells are locked on the inside. So it doesn't matter how much insulin knocks on the door, knock, 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 let me in. The cell is locked from the inside. It says, no thanks, we're full. We cannot cope with any glucose at the moment. We don't want the glucose inside the cells because that would damage the cells, glycation damage. And so the glucose sits in the bloodstream instead of being absorbed. It's the thing that's referred to as type 2 diabetes. That's what I'm talking about, basically. It is a Randle cycle effect. And it is not a dysfunction nor a pathology. It occurs for the reason I've just given you. If glucose is allowed to pour into a cell according to its concentration gradient with no control, the cells of your body would become vastly damaged by glycation. The cells have to be able to protect themselves and say no. They have to have the lock on the inside to lock that door, and that's what the Randle cycle is. So the sacrificial lambs become the much more simple cells of the epithelium, of the vascular tree, the red blood cells, the white blood cells, etc., which can be much more easily, much more rapidly broken down and replaced with new cells. Okay, so if you consume a diet which is moderate carbohydrate, moderate fat, or high carbohydrate, moderate fat, or high fat, moderate carbohydrate, any real substantive mixture, you are asking for Randle cycle activation, i.e., ergo, you are asking for type 2 diabetes at some point in your life. The balanced diet, we should eat a balanced diet with a mixture of the macros, is the most successful piece of propaganda marketing that this world has ever seen. Of course, balance is good. The lady with the scales, etc. Why would we question balance? Balance is all about goodness and light and fairness and justness. I'll tell you why it's no good. Well, I've just told you the reason metabolically why it's no good, but it's also no good from a basic logic standpoint. Animals, every animal, and human beings are an animal. Every single animal on this planet is a specialist. We have developed along a particular nutritional line to eat a specific way. Human beings have developed over something like 4.5, 5 million years to be obligate hyper-carnivores. We are designed biologically to get the vast majority of our energy from fat, the building blocks for the structures of our body from protein, and we are designed to consume very, very little carbohydrate indeed. It's only modern lifestyles, modern technology, modern industry that has led us to change our diet, the agrarian revolution, the technological revolution, etc. It's that which leads people to eat a diet which is entirely inappropriate for our species, and it's killing us. That's why the diabetes is such an endemic problem around the world. So that's the first thing. The second thing is in the fact that when you have those fadas pulled up on the Randle cycle, necessarily what happens is there's a slight reduction in the level of ATP within the cells that's affected that way. That means you have more ADP plus PI. PI is inorganic phosphate. Inorganic phosphate is the very thing that binds to pro-inflammatory cytokines to tell the body there's a problem and we need to be inflamed. Inflammation is the root cause of cardiovascular disease, atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. It's implicated in type 2 diabetes as a concomitant issue. It's implicated in most forms of cancer, most forms of dementia, all the big killers. chronic systemic inflammation. So that should be enough for people to go, right, I need to choose a diet which is either rich in fat and poor in carbohydrate, or rich in carbohydrate and poor in fat. That's right. You do need to do that. You need to stay right away from the mixed macronutrient, the balanced diet. Balance is not your friend in your diet. Before you decide, however, which one of those diets you're going to choose, you need to make a simple bit of logical checking here. One of those diets will provide you with all the nutrients that you require for a long and healthy life. And one of those diets is absolutely, utterly destitute of nutrient for a human being. There is no choice to make. It's very, very simple. What you need to do is follow your genetic gift, follow our past as a speciation, eat appropriately for your species. High fat, high animal or moderate animal protein, very, very little carbohydrate to speak of. That is the appropriate diet for a human being.
Wow, and what I totally agree with you. I've been since we last talked. By the way, I've been posting every single day, and the movement is growing a little bit in Brazil about the carnivore diet itself, but still getting there.
Yeah.
But coming back to the Randle cycle,
Yep.
what problem is the body trying to solve with the Randle cycle?
Well,
Does
the
that make
problem,
sense?
yeah, exactly. The problem is a cell, any given cell, has a requirement for what we'll call energetic substrate for metabolic reactions, chemical reactions, fats and carbohydrates, fats or carbohydrates, right? Once the needs of that cell is met in that regard, if there's an overplus of energetic substrates in the bloodstream that the cells don't need right now, depending on what the substrate is, there'll be more or less inhibition of that cell to taking that nutrient in for the reason I spoke about before.
Got
If
it.
there's
Yes.
too much
Okay.
fat, your muscle cells, for example, will build up a store of fat, intramyocellular lipid. Yes. The reason for that is because lipid is very useful as an energy source. It's very energy dense, and it is not toxic to the cell. So of course we can have a store of it right here. There's also a store of sugar in a muscle cell. It's called glycogen. That's a very, very limited amount. Why? Well, because a high amount of glucose within a cell will destroy that cell chemically by joining glucose molecules onto protein and fat-based structures that isn't supposed to be there. There's a chemical linkage that occurs. I've referred to it already. It's called glycation, and it will destroy the function of a cell and kill a cell over time, destroy it. So the cell has to protect itself from that. And it does that, as I said, by pulling those fatters up, locking that door from the inside to sugar. Sugar can't get in. Insulin will not work because insulin is a key to open the door from the outside, but only if the key on the inside is unlocked. A lot of people say insulin is the master here. Insulin is in charge. Insulin is in control. Wrong. Insulin is a bit player. The master control is held within each individual cell. The Randle cycle is the very thing that maintains that control for each cell.
Wow. Oh, now I just had an insight. So when people say, for example, oh, you only get diabetic if you get, for example, insulin resistant,
That's right.
and insulin resistant is the a chronic effect of chronic high insulin throughout the years. What you're telling me is it's not really the chronic elevated insulin this whole time, but really the first step is that cell being locked.
Right. Back again.
Okay, we're
Okie
back.
dokie.
Did
Right.
you
So
hear my whole question?
no, you were basically saying that the insight there is that most people will suggest to you that the root cause of diabetes is insulin resistance, and insulin resistance starts years before the diabetes is apparent. What I am saying is that is 180 degrees out of phase with reality. Completely wrong. Insulin resistance occurs because of the Randle cycle, and that
That's the
occurs
insight.
because of the habit of pouring too much contraindicated, unnecessary carbohydrate down your neck.
And that's why some people there are on the fruitarian diet, for example,
Yeah,
which is nuts.
it is
But
nuts. Yes.
even though they're in the fruitarian diet, they might not get diabetes, right?
Correct. They might not
Is that they might
because
not?
the most powerful activator of the Randle cycle is a diet that is mixed in terms of fat and carbohydrate. That's not to say the fruitarian diet can't cause diabetes. It absolutely can cause diabetes. The more likely problem with the fruitarian diet is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and all the sequelae related to that. Secondarily, with fructose, you need to be aware that when you consume fructose, most of the fructose you consume has to be dealt with by the liver. And as a function of that, that will pull down the ATP concentration in the liver cells. You're asking for a
Got
problem.
it. Yep, that is for sure. So
Fruit
let
sugar
me.
is much worse for you, gram per gram, than glucose. Much worse.
Why is that?
Because fructose pulls down the ATP concentration in your liver cells and gives you fatty liver disease and all sorts of problems. Whereas glucose goes through a different pathway that affects other cells of the body and does so much less powerfully. The level of glycation damage that you can expect from fructose is somewhere between 7 to 11 times worse than for glucose.
Even though, but does that have the same effect given that we have more glucose in the blood than the fructose?
That's why I said gram for gram.
Got it, got it. But
Yeah.
I mean, talking about the body itself and the reality that
As a
goes on in
whole,
our body.
well,
How do you see it? Yeah,
okay,
as a whole.
as a whole, the
Hmm.
correct approach is to severely limit the intake of all sources of carbohydrate, simple and complex. There is no real place in the human diet for carbohydrate. That is not our design. You should not
Wow.
do that.
So like people that are doing the animal-based diet, post-Saladino animal-based diet. And
Mm.
by the way, there is a guy in Brazil. He's
Yeah,
actually a cool guy
yeah.
that he just like rebranded the post-Saladino diet in Brazil. It's
Oh, yeah.
called the jungle diet. It's called the jungle diet.
The
And
jungle diet. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
so he's like doing the whole rebranding and stuff, and
yeah,
he's pushing that
yeah,
high fat like meat and high fat meat and
yeah,
cheese and
yeah,
like pretty much a carnivore diet with
yeah,
like potatoes
yeah.
and fruit,
Mm,
a lot of fruit.
mm.
So that would make the Randle cycle keep happening,
Yeah. Okay.
and that also.
Let me be very, very clear. Paul Saladino is an imbecile. You do not want to take dietary advice from Paul Saladino. I promise you. Nothing he says about the diet these days is correct, just about. The man can't even critically read a piece of peer-reviewed published research and get the correct interpretation out of the thing. He's scientifically illiterate. He knows nothing whatever about nutrition. He is not a source of information that you want to take remotely seriously. Okay?
Wow.
Pretty
Yeah,
clear.
I'm not a big fan.
Mm,
I'm not a big fan of the jungle diet or the animal based diet myself.
mm,
Coming back to the Randle cycle,
mm.
so the animal based or the jungle diet or whatever, they both are pretty high fat, high carb.
Yep. There you go.
So
Bad idea.
that's that our goal, that Randle cycle idea.
Yep.
And let me do the breakdown again, like 12, like I'm just watching this and I've never heard of the Randle cycle before.
Yep.
And please tell me if I'm mistaken, just correct me. So
Okay.
the Randle cycle will happen if you
Mm.
mix carbs and if you mix fat in the diet. So a medium fat, medium carb diet, just like the balanced diet, will activate the Randle cycle. What is that Randle cycle? The Randle cycle will try to, it's the body's ability to defend itself from glycation. So
Yep.
the cells will defend itself from the glycation so they
Yes.
won't die.
Yes.
So when you mix high, so if you eat high fat, low carb, that doesn't happen because the cell we're using is usually using mostly beta oxidation, using
Yeah.
mostly fat as fuel. If you eat a high carb, low fat, the Randle cycle doesn't happen because the cell is using mostly sugar as fuel, right? So carbs as fuel,
Mm-hmm.
and that doesn't make it like it wants to defend itself. But
Mm-hmm.
if you mix both carbs and fat, choose. And
Problem.
I want to ask you, like, what is that threshold next? But if
Yes.
you mix fat and carbs, the
Yeah.
cell to try to defend itself from pretty much dying will
Yeah.
like pull the plug, and no more
Yeah.
sugar can get into the cell, and
Mm.
no more fat too,
Right.
right?
Okay.
So that
Before we get to
happens,
what
and
the
then
actual threshold is,
uh-huh.
there's only one thing I would change about the description you just gave us. I would
Okay.
change saying it does not happen in the case of high fat, low carb, or high carb, low fat
It's
to
still
it is
happening, but at a
much
lower point.
less likely to be a problem.
Got
Vastly,
it.
the highest probability of a Randle cycle issue is if you mix your macros. Vastly, by a long way. Okay, what is the threshold? Well, how long is a piece of string? One cell might be experiencing a different situation to any other cell, either nearby or disparate in some other tissue in the body. Each individual cell has its own mechanism, its own Randle cycle machinery. Each cell will have its faders pulled to whatever level that cell needs at that time. So you can't say, this is the level. Go over this level and you've got a problem. Stay under that level and you won't. That's nonsense. That's not how the body works. The body is a collection of disparate cells that work together and communicate with each other through other medium, or other media, I should say. And it's the balance of everything that determines the outputs. You might find, for example, any one given muscle might have its Randle cycle activated highly, whereas a muscle right next to it won't. You might find that the liver is doing something quite different from what the muscles are doing at large, for example. So not only individual cells, but also functionally grouped blocks of cells, organs, also have plus or minus, and the whole picture is what determines a person's experience as an organism. It's vastly complex.
Wow.
So with that in
So
mind, the safest approach to diet is to avoid the problem by reducing the likelihood that that problem will occur by eating a diet which is appropriate for your species. And that is a diet that does not contain any amount of carbohydrate to speak of at any time.
wow.
Job's a good one.
Okay, so no, so that's even deeper than I thought it was, the Randle cycle.
Mm.
So every single cell uses it
Yeah.
or can be activated it, and every single And the mechanisms will be through moderate fat, moderate carbs, but it could be activated plus or minus that as well. We never know. But the probability that won't be activated less would be if it's high fat, low carb, or low carb, high fat. I got that. So that's amazing. For the people that are watching and they're still having any questions about the Randle cycle, can you do a even maybe 3-minute like full review of what we just talked in this previous 30 minutes?
Right.
And then I want to ask you some other stuff.
Sure. The Randle cycle is not any one thing. It's just a way of describing the phenomena. The Randle cycle is made up of a whole bunch of different bits of metabolic machinery that work together in each one of the cells in our body. Its job is to determine the fuel mix that's being oxidized by that cell at that time. It's most strongly controlled externally by what the fuel source has been most recently. That will determine what it wants to do next. To get it to do something different from what it wants to do next, you have to apply quite a lot of force because of the inertia, the rolling of that ball bearing in that groove in that piece of wood. You have to move the piece of wood. It takes an effort to do it. You could also think of it as a train going one way on a track that has to be pulled to a full stop and then accelerated back the other way, which is even harder. There's a lot of inertia inside a cell. So perhaps the train analogy is even better than the piece of wood analogy because it's quite easy to move a bit of wood and get a ball bearing to move. Who knows? Why does the Randle cycle exist? It exists to protect the cells from damage that those cells would experience were sugar allowed to pour into those cells according to its concentration gradient in the blood. Simple as that.
But not only sugar, does fat as well, right? So does the fat gets locked out as well? Is that a thing?
Not so much. Not so much. I mean, sugar will discourage fat from being oxidized in the mitochondria. Yes, but it will not stop fat from entering the cell and being stored in the cell.
Got it. And that's why people get fat. That's why people get fat as well.
Well, that's one way a person can store some fat in their muscles. It's not why people get fat. People get fat because, well, the most common cause of people getting fat, as in adipose tissue, is because of chronically elevated insulin. That's the most common cause.
Got it. Which is also connected to
insulin prevents the oxidation of fat. Largely, it discourages it very powerfully, and that causes that fat to be stored in the adipose tissue. So there's that.
Got it. Can you say that if we're in ketosis, then the Randle cycle is not happening?
Not necessarily. Because as I said, each individual cell in your body has its own Randle cycle mechanism. Two cells right next to each other might be doing completely different things. It is less likely if you're in ketosis that Randle cycle is activated to any meaningful degree in your body at that time, but it's not impossible. Not impossible at all.
Got it. Man, that is awesome. So the Randle cycle cannot be avoided. It might happen, but decreasing the probability of the Randle cycle happening would be the best practice. If you want, you can say longevity, of course, because there's no studies putting two people in a lab.
Yeah.
But it would be the best option to not activate it and possibly not activate it and have less of a probability of having high blood sugar and the high blood pressure and atherosclerosis. By the way, you said you were an expert in cardiovascular.
Yeah.
Can you
pathophysiology
that for me? Pathophysiology. There we go.
Yeah.
So would eating a high fat diet like a carnivore diet,
Yeah.
even though that's less likely to be activating more Randle cycles or
Yes.
less likely to be activating the Randle cycle,
Yes. Vastly less
will
likely.
that,
Yeah.
yes, will that be a problem when thinking about atherosclerosis? Because a lot of
Absolutely
people,
not.
that's not, it's not only in
Absolutely
the
not.
US.
No. No. Fat does not cause heart disease. Neither do any of the lipids, nor the lipoproteins, nor any subfraction of the lipoproteins. None of those things cause atherosclerosis to occur. That is a false, theological, anti-scientific, bought and paid for consensus statement underpinned by lots of money from Big Pharma and nothing else. There's no science whatsoever to support the idea that fat has anything at all to do with heart disease, cause and effect. Nothing. Simple as that.
This is not only a like a big way that like the doctors and nutritionists push this, not only in the US but in Brazil.
Hmm.
They do it so much, and
Yes.
it is annoying. And
Hmm.
I also, like you just said, I also, based on what I study, I've seen that this is completely wrong. Can
Yes.
we go more in depth about why is that wrong and why eating saturated fat won't be the problem?
Right. Well, because human beings have
Connecting
been,
that to the Randle cycle as well.
well, I think we've covered the Randle cycle, which is you should not mix fat and carbohydrate in your diet. Therefore, you should choose a diet that is rich in fat or that is rich in carbohydrate and poor in the other. One of those diets will provide you with everything you need nutritionally, and that is the high-fat diet. And one of them is absolutely destitute for a human being, and that's the high-carbohydrate diet. So there is no choice to make. You eat a high-fat, moderate protein diet based on animal products almost exclusively. End of discussion on that. Why isn't the consumption of saturated fat a problem? Well, because human beings have been doing that for about 4.5 million years. We are absolutely adapted to that. Further to that, the exact amount of scientific evidence linking saturated fat to heart disease in a cause and effect manner is none. Zero. Not a single data point anywhere in the literature. Not one. It's theology. Complete theology. It's nothing even remotely akin to science. And then people say, well, it's not the fat itself, it's the lipoprotein carriers of fat, like LDL, or some subfraction of the LDL, like the ApoB100 protein, or the LP little a, or something like that, or large fluffy versus small dense particle. All of that is also theological nonsense. None of that enjoys any scientific backing either. All it enjoys is a consensus position statement, which is bought and paid for with lots of money from Big Pharma. There is not one single experiment that exists anywhere on this planet that's ever been published that can remotely establish a cause and effect relationship between lipids or lipoproteins or any subfraction of them and heart disease. And when you look at a deterministic model of the manner in which atherosclerosis develops, it's not even possible from a logical standpoint. I mean, I can prove that to you in 2 seconds flat, really, or probably slightly longer than that, but here it goes.
Let's do it.
Atheroscleroses develop where?
Endothelium,
In the endothelium of what?
arteries.
Correct. And not the veins?
Not the veins.
That's correct, not the veins. The blood that flows through the veins is the same blood that's flowing through the arteries, is it not?
It is.
Containing the same cholesterol, does it not? Very
Yes.
much. We're done, aren't we? That's all you need. If
So it,
cholesterol or lipoproteins of any kind or saturated fat were the cause of atherosclerosis, it would cause atherosclerosis in both arteries and in veins. It doesn't. We're finished. We're done. Simple as that.
So why doesn't it cause in veins as well?
Because to get atherosclerosis to develop those lesions, you need several things. You need turbulent blood flow,
So high pressure.
high pressure, and you'll also find that atherosclerotic lesions don't develop evenly across the inner surface of even on the arteries. They develop in very predictable areas within the arterial tree. When we go to look for these things using scanning techniques or autopsy techniques or surgical techniques or whatever, we know exactly where to go to find these things. We go straight there. We don't bother looking, oh, well, I wonder where these lesions will be. We know where they'll be. And they are the areas where turbulence occurs in the blood flow because of bifurcations or curvatures under pulsatile high pressure. So we need high pressure. We need turbulent flow. Those two things are connected. Fine. We also need damage, inflammation, damage, physical and or chemical to those endothelial cell beds, which again is tied up with the pressure and turbulence. So again, the causal factors here seem to be pressure and turbulence of blood flow. What else do we need? We need an inflammatory response, which we're only going to get in the case of damage to the cells, because cells don't just become inflamed when they're not damaged by something, because the veins
So
aren't experiencing
oxidation.
it. Yeah, I mean, the other thing that's interesting is you take a vein out of someone's leg and you graft it across a blockage in their heart, doing a bypass surgery, turning that vein into an artery, that vein starts to get atherosclerosis. When that vein's been
Wait,
sitting in that person's leg for their whole life and never got any atherosclerosis, you move it from the low pressure side, the venous side, and you put it on the high pressure side and the arterial side of the heart muscle. Bingo! Atherosclerosis starts to
wow.
develop. So this whole idea that the cause of atherosclerosis is fat of any kind directly, or lipids that carry the fat of any kind is utterly, fundamentally, logically ridiculous. It does not hold up even to the most cursory basic observations or refutations of basic logic. You cannot build a deterministic model out of that. We are done.
That why don't people know about this? Like
Because they're not
this
told
is
that. They are told over and over and over and over again that saturated fat and cholesterol are a problem. Why are they told that? Because
money, dollars.
that's why.
The
Safe and
study
effective.
this
Safe and effective. Effective and safe. Don't question the science. I'm the science. I'm safe and effective. Me. Fat causes heart disease. So does cholesterol. Because I said so. There's no science behind it.
just
It's rubbish.
man.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it?
So yeah, and I mean, if you think about it, the LDL itself, when it's going to the damaged endothelium,
Mm,
it's kind of trying to fix it.
that's right. That's
But
exactly what it
because
is.
the endothelium
Well, look,
has been damaged.
yes, 80%, 50%, not 80, 50% by weight and by volume of the makeup of the cell membranes of every cell in your body, including endothelial cells, is molecular cholesterol. If you damage that cell, you need raw materials to repair that cell. The manner in which that material is delivered to that cell is via the LDL transporter. That's why it exists. It exists because there's a length of DNA that encodes for its generation. The whole idea that LDL or cholesterol, any of those things, cause heart disease is no better logically than suggesting to you that because every time I turn on the TV and see a forest fire, every time there are fire crews running around. Ergo, the cause of the forest fire must be those fire crews. It's no better than that. It's ridiculous in the extreme. Theological claptrap. Nonsense.
Wow.
Atherosclerotic heart disease is a physical, mechanical, traceable problem. Elevated blood pressure, turbulent flow, damage and inflammation to the cells. If you take any of those things away, atherosclerosis can not develop. In the same way that when you've got a fire, if you remove oxygen or heat or a fuel source, the fire cannot occur.
Oh, so it's an or statement, right? It's an or statement. With no inflammation, even though there could be high pressure and turbulence,
Yeah.
atherosclerosis cannot
Correct.
happen.
It cannot occur without inflammation. However, if you physically or chemically damage your endothelial cell linings, then you will get inflammation because your body reacts to that
Yeah.
damage via inflammation. But the proximal cause, the first thing that has to occur for heart disease is physical or chemical damage to that cell bed. The physical damage comes from pressure exerted via the turbulent flow. It's increased transit time of blood under pressure past that particular zone that causes the problem. The chemical damage is oxidative, or our good old friend sugar, or both.
Glycation.
Right. Those are the causes. Not fat. Not fat at all. Or lipids or lipoproteins. None of those things are true. How's that?
That is so Jesus, that is so interesting.
Mm.
And it only occurs in the area with the most turbulent flow.
Correct.
With the most pressure.
Correct.
So so I am in 2021 I graduated as a mechanical engineering student. So
Yeah.
I'm a mechanical engineer since 2021, but now I've moved into the health and wellness space. But I've studied like turbulence, the flows and in all of those classes in mechanical engineering. So
Yep.
based on my prior knowledge of that, and I don't know the physiology of the arteries, but
Yep.
it is so the most turbulent flow will happen if there are curves
Yes.
or bifurcations, right?
Correct.
So
and that's where we find the lesions. Yes.
oh man, Jesus! So it does make logical sense, huh?
Of course it does. I wouldn't have said it if it wasn't right. Ted wouldn't allow it, would you, Ted? No, I wouldn't allow that. There you go.
Man, that is so it's so that analogy of the, like you said, if you just if you see fire in the forest, you're blaming the firefighter, Jesus, firefighters. Yes.
Yeah.
That I've been away from the US for a while, man. So my English is kind of getting better now. It's
Good.
It's flowing better
Good.
as I talk, but sometimes I still
your English is spot on. I can understand you perfectly. It's fine.
But so it's that same analogy, that if your house is on fire and the firefighters come, they are not causing the fire.
That's right.
Or let's say the water is not causing the fire, right? So
Yeah.
it's kind of saying, well, the water, since the water is like getting sprayed at the fire, that's causing the fire. No, not really. The fire was caused
You got it.
by other stuff. And that is so interesting that it only happens where there is the most pressure. And it doesn't happen in the veins. It doesn't happen anywhere else.
That's right.
Man, do you have any classes on that?
Well, I just gave you
so
one.
we can translate it?
I just gave
Yes.
you one. Translate that. Subtitle all of that, Antonio.
No, yeah, I'll subtitle that. I'll make a PDF out of that. And well, I gotta train my AI to do that, to know that. And so we covered the Randle Cycle, and we covered that LDL and saturated fat do not cause heart disease. And
That's right.
by the way, that oxidation and that damage in the endothelium, can that be a problem caused or associated, but let's stick with caused by vegetable oils as well?
Oh, you bet. Yeah, there is definitely some very good inference along those lines, precisely because inflammation is one of those required things in that cell bed. And we know that polyunsaturated and to some degree monounsaturated oils tend to activate pro-inflammatory pathways directly. We also know that both poly and monounsaturated oils can inveigle themselves into lipid rafts, thus rendering those lipid rafts less functional, less able to withstand mechanical pressures problems. The half-life of polyunsaturates in cell membranes can be several years in some cells in the body. So there is absolutely an inference that non-saturated vegetable, largely fats, can be a real problem. There's also talk around deuterium playing a role in that, because when you say saturated animal fat, a lot of people don't quite get it that even if you eat animal fat, like you get the fat off the side of a piece of beef, that's not all saturated. That's got some poly and monounsaturates mixed in. But that doesn't seem to cause the problem. It almost seems like the fat needs to come from a vegetable source. So that means there must be another linkage there as well, or something else that's required to tie into that. And the thinking is it's probably a deuterium state thing, but that's for another day.
Could it be because also like the animal cells resemble more our cells than the plant cells? Is
I
that
don't
a
think so.
possibility?
I don't think so, because when you eat fat and protein, your stomach acid breaks it down almost completely to constituent molecules and peptides and fatty acid molecules. You don't tend to pass intact material into your body.
Got it.
Mm.
And do the polyunsaturated fats from vegetable oils,
Mm.
do they interfere or do they have any play when the Randle cycle happens?
Not directly, as far as I'm aware. The Randle cycle issue doesn't really seem to care what the source of the fat is or what the source of the carbohydrate was in the first place. It seems to be a reaction between glycolytic pathways and fat using
Got it.
pathways.
Got it. And my last question is,
Yo.
what is the best way to study the Randle cycle? Because I know there are two papers, right? The original one and the other one that it is a review of some other scientists about the original.
All right. The single best way to study the Randle cycle, in my opinion, is to watch my playlist on the Randle cycle on my channel, because I've made a number of videos about it where I describe it in a number of different ways, in a number of different videos at different levels for different audiences. Watch the whole lot. Something in there will click for you. I would not suggest you waste too much time reading those papers. The first paper, the original paper by Sir Philip Randle, who first proposed the thing and called it the glycerol fatty acid cycle, is really just a proposal, just a description. Look, here's largely how the thing works. That it doesn't really get down to the nitty-gritty of the actual mechanism by which it does it. And the secondary paper, which is called something like A New Look at the Randle Cycle, A New Look at Something for an Old Hat or something like that. You know the paper I mean. It was published maybe a decade ago. That paper is very, very poorly written.
The one with the images, right?
Yeah, the one that those images come from, those classic Randle cycle diagrams. The diagrams themselves have a utility. They are of use to help describe the thing grossly. But the people that wrote that paper wrote it very badly, very poorly. There are a number of inaccurate statements in there. They do not apparently understand what the thing is, why it's there, and why it's evolved as such. And they seem to me, from my reading of it, to be deeply compromised in terms of their conclusion making about the thing. I think it's a very, very
Wow.
poor paper, and I wouldn't bother reading it. I did because I wanted to
God.
educate myself about what these people are saying. Um, but I doubt that many people have the level of knowledge, gumption, scientific acumen to read that thing and see how bad it is. They could read that thing and think it's quite credible. No, it isn't. In the same way that a lot of people listen to not really a doctor, Paul Salad, I don't know, and think he's credible. No, he's not. Not in terms of anything he's got to say about science or nutrition. So there it is.
Got it. And actually, my last question now,
Yeah.
that's a very quick one. So when Sir Philip Randle first studied the Randle cycle, is it
Yep.
in vitro?
He did some work to establish that what he was talking about was plausible and to identify some of the major enzymes, transporters, and things that were involved at the gross level in the thing. Absolutely. I don't personally think he had a great grasp on the full rabbit warren, the full how it all works, how it all interacts. And I certainly don't think he understood why it was there any more than the people that wrote the paper 10 years ago or so, whatever. I mean, I think I am the only person going around saying, look, the Randle cycle is not some kind of problem. It's not a mistake. It's evolved because of positive and negative selection pressures to do a job, to do an exacting job, and it does it perfectly. Everyone's running around saying insulin resistance is a pathology. Insulin resistance is a disease process or is the cause of a disease process, that being type 2 diabetes. No. So to circle back to where we started in the very beginning, that's absolute nonsense. It's 180 degrees out of phase with reality. No, it's not a mistake and it's not a disease, and neither is the cause of a disease. Diabetes, type 2 diabetes, is chronically elevated blood glucose. And the cause of it is consuming too much glucose or things that break down
That's
to
simple.
glucose. It's that simple. Again, with the deterministic modeling. Oh, no, fat causes diabetes. Absolute garbage. No, it doesn't. Fat activates the Randle cycle. Yes, it's supposed to protect the cells from damage that they would suffer from the glucose. The glucose, therefore, builds up in the bloodstream, but only if you eat a bunch of glucose that you shouldn't have. I hope this is clear. Anyway, the take-home message is on the science. Trust me, I'm safe and effective. Don't question the science, even though that's how you do science. Join me and Ted next time when someone will be wrong on interwebs, because that doesn't look like slowing down, does it?
Yeah,
Cool.
Professor, thank you so much.
My
I
pleasure.
think our talk today was amazing, and a lot of people will enjoy it very much and learn it.
Good. I hope the translation into Portuguese doesn't mean it loses anything. I'm sure I'm
No,
sure
I
it won't.
I will review it. I will review it for sure. So
cool.
if it doesn't, I'll catch it. So
Yeah.
for example, you wouldn't catch the post salad I don't know thing.
No, I won't catch that one.
I'm
Paul
gonna
Salad, I don't know who Bart K is. He literally said that. He came online and was asked about me by Anthony Chafee, Dr. Anthony Chafee, and he said, I don't know who that is. Well, Paul and I did several videos together about 5 or 6 years ago. So either there's something badly wrong with his memory or he's a liar.
One of the two, right?
Never heard of me. Of course you haven't, Paul. And the reason I call him not really a Dr. Paul Salad I don't know is because, well, he's qualified as a medical doctor. He's also qualified as a psychiatrist, but he's never practiced medicine, not one single day in his life. Ever. He never even, he never got to that. He just qualified out and then went straight to being a social media influencer because that was probably more lucrative and more fun. So yes, he's qualified as a doctor, but he isn't one. He's never been one. That's what I'm saying. Just to make that clear. Okay. Good.
All right, Professor. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. All right, my man.
I'll see you in the next one.